Well, welcome to the October 18th, 2023 meeting of the Newbury Planning Board. Before I take a roll call of the members, I do have some sad news I'd like to share. As many of you know this, but we lost our good friend and colleague, George Morse, who passed away on October 8th. George is survived by his wife, Joan. They celebrated their 59th wedding anniversary this year. He was also survived by his son, Evan, and Evan's wife, Elizabeth, George's son, Andrew, and wife, Christine, and also three grandchildren, Amy, Connor, and Katie. George was the longest serving member on the currently serving member on the planning board. He was appointed an associate member in 2012, and then won two successive 5-year terms as a full elected member in 2014 and 2019. George was, the one word I've consistently heard in describing George is what a gentleman he was, and he truly was. He had a certain quiet dignity about him that I think people respected, and all of those who knew him respected and loved him. We're going to miss him on the board. He was very calm and thoughtful in his demeanor and his wisdom and experience, and I think he's going to be sorely missed. And I'm sure you'll all join me in offering our sincere sympathies to George's family, and he will be missed, truly. Well, that said, unless anyone has anything they'd like to add to that, I'll move on to the business.
Larry, I would just like to echo what you said and acknowledge what a statesman George was, and what a pleasure it was to work with him. A true gentleman, and heart condolences to Joan and family. A good friend.
Absolutely.
And also, Larry, I'd like to say something. Tremendous neighbor. This town was fortunate and gifted with George on the planning board. I was so impressed by his conscientiousness, but sense of humor. His stories, terrific. He introduced me to Martha. How much better does that get? So I'll miss him, and we all wish Joan all the support she can get, and we'll all miss him tremendously. If there's anything we can do, I'm sure we would do it for Joan. Absolutely, hands down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, I would also like to just echo all of that. I mean, George was tremendously supportive of me in my position, and I know that John Weiss, when he was chair, relied tremendously on George and his wisdom and his guidance when George was the vice chair. And his attention to detail was amazing. You know, I'd give him drafts of decisions and things like that, and he would come back and find every typo, every error in it, and always passed on his comments very, very graciously. And he was just such a kind person, and so proud of his family, and he's going to be tremendously missed.
I agree.
Thanks, Martha.
Well, why don't we go forward unless anyone else has anything they'd like to add? So let me confirm. I'm sorry.
Larry, I'm sorry. Can I say one quick thing, and then I
take all the time.
It looks like. Well, I just wanted to say I actually met George. I really enjoyed working with him since being a part of this team in the planning office in Newbury. But I actually met George not that many, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when I was working at the Watershed Association in Ipswich. And he called up and said, I have a kayak. It's not doing me any good anymore. And I'd like people to use it. And he donated his kayak to the Watershed Association, which has a whole fleet of boats that the public and members of the association can use over on the Ipswich River. So, I just happened to be the one in the office who picked up the phone, and I had a really lovely conversation with George, and then we arranged for him to bring his kayak over, and had a lovely conversation around that, and then just years later, I ended up working with him again. So I just really appreciate having known him in a couple different ways, and agree with everything you've all said. He was very wise, and I really appreciate his calmness as well. He was just very thoughtful and always had a great contribution. So, and I see Steve Mansion has a hand up. If I don't know if it's related to this conversation or not.
Okay, Steve, is this, well, why don't you go ahead and let Steve.
Yes, it is related to this conversation, and I concur with all the thoughts that are being expressed about George. I think Martha said it very well when she used the word kindness. I did not have the occasion to have many conversations with George, but somewhere deep within the conversation was a upwelling of thoughtful kindness that I always felt when I talked to him about issues that were beyond the planning board. And I share your condolences, and I have my own as well. So thank you for bringing this to our attention, Larry. I'll miss him.
Thank you, Steve. Your kind thoughts are really appreciated, for sure.
Thank you. I do have one more thing to say also, I'm sorry, which is that George was the one who brought Mary to the board and introduced me to her, and she came in and had many conversations with me about joining the board. And, what's better than that? We really have George to thanks for Mary's presence.
And to
So.
blame.
Not at all.
Thanks, Martha. That's sweet of you.
Well, that's wonderful. It's wonderful. He was loved and he will be missed, no question. Well, I guess we'll have to go forward, and let me confirm that all the members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So planning board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Peter Pecos.
Yes.
Woody Knight.
Yes.
Mary Stone.
Yes.
In-town staff, when I call your name, please respond. Martha Taylor, Planning Director.
Yes.
And Kristen Grubbs, Assistant Town Planner.
Yes.
All right, anticipated speakers. Probably, well, we're anticipating Ian Burns and Kayla Rennie from MVPC will be joining us, but I don't think they're here yet. Also, Kevin Whitney, K&R Construction. Is Kevin here yet?
I don't see him yet.
No. Steve Sawyer, I think you're here. See your name anyway, Steve.
Yeah.
So the October 18th, 2023 open meeting of the Newbury Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which extends the Governor's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31, 2025. This order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location and allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For this meeting, the Newbury Planning Board is convening by video conference via Zoom as posted on the Planning Board's agenda, which can be found on the town's website, and which identifies how the public may join. You may join us by going to http://zoom.us and entering meeting ID 832-741-3056, password code 108790, or by calling 1-929-205-6099 US. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and the attendees are participating by video and/or telephone conference. The meeting is also being broadcast live through Local Access Channel 9 on Zoom and at www.tnctv.org, and the recording will be available on the Newbury Access YouTube channel. Meeting materials were provided to the board members prior to the meeting for review. Applicants or their representatives may be called upon to speak and, if needed, share information to the screen. Please state your intention after you've been called. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. As chair, I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After speakers conclude their remarks, I will go down the list of board members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, for all attendees except board members and staff, please remember to mute your computer using your mute button or your phone. Hit *6 to toggle mute or unmute when you are not speaking. Please use earbuds or earphones with tablets and cell phones. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Please be aware that video participants can see you and that you should take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If board members wish to engage in discussion with other members, please do so through me taking care to identify yourself when you wish to speak. For public comment, there will be an opportunity for public comment and questions during public hearings. After board members have spoken, I will afford the public an opportunity to comment and/or ask questions as follows. I will seek questions and comments through the Zoom raised hand function. For video conference participants, to raise your hand, hover over the bottom of the Zoom window below the photo gallery and click on the gray hand that appears. Please ensure your name is fully and correctly displayed on the participant list. You may rename yourself by using the More function next to your name. For telephone participants, to raise your hand in a Zoom meeting, hit *9 on the phone keypad. I will then allow questions and comments from members of the public who have raised their hands in the order in which they are listed, which is determined by the order in which people click on the raised hand function. Each participant will be called on to provide his or her name and address and then ask a question or make a comment. I will afford the applicant or participant or his or her representative the opportunity to reply. Your hand will be lowered when you have been given the floor for your questions. I will then continue down the list of those in the raised hand column and again afford the participant, applicant, or representative an opportunity to speak. Should there be a physical or electronic submittal of questions or concerns, they will be noted for the record. And again, the participant, applicant, or representative will be afforded the opportunity to speak if the issues raised have not yet been addressed. And finally, note that each vote taken at this meeting will be conducted via roll call. So turning to the agenda, the first item is liaison reports. Martha, anything from the select board?
I actually was not able to attend the last meeting. It was on the day that I returned from Reno. I do know that there were some appointments on the meeting to the Finance Committee, I think the Capital Planning Committee and the Council on Aging, but I actually have not heard the results of those votes. The select board also met last night to interview the 2 finalist candidates for fire chief, and I believe that they did select one and are extending an offer.
Thank you, Martha. The regular meeting of the ZBA monthly meeting is tomorrow night. They have 2 matters on the agenda. A new special permit application for 19 Independence Way to increase a dwelling in height and to replace a raised dwelling with an increase in height. And they're also taking up a continued public hearing regarding 134 Northern Boulevard. They're reviewing and discussion of a draft decision for the project. That project was voted down at their last meeting. That's all I have for ZBA. Woody, anything from Concom?
Conservation met last night, and the only thing that pertained to the planning board was the certificate of compliance for Governor Dominguez Academy for the environmental studies building. They granted the certificate of compliance for the building, so they're all set with that. And other than that, there was just regular business as usual.
Okay, thank you, Woody. Martha, anything from MVPC?
The monthly commissioners meeting is going to be held tomorrow. There will be a special presentation from one of their transportation staff members, Tony Collins, on the MV Vision Zero transportation plan, which I think I've mentioned before, is really focused on eliminating fatalities and reducing serious injuries in transportation. They're also bringing on a couple of new staff members, one who's a cultural liaison. And the planners meeting will be next week.
Okay, thanks, Martha. Next, we have the September financial report. I'll read that briefly, and then at 7:15, we can talk about our public hearings. So for September, we have payroll warrants for the planning director and assistant planner, PR 24-6 for the pay period ending 9/9/23, and PR 24-7 for the pay period ending 9/23/23, and planning board expense invoice for the Verizon Wireless, the rental of the planning board iPad for 9/21/23. So it is 7:15, and we do have two public hearings on the agenda. These are both for 170 Orchard Street. These have been continued from October 4th till today. And we do have a request in writing from the applicant to continue both of these until our November 15th, 2023 meeting at 7:15 PM via Zoom. If you recall, we only have 3 qualified voting members on this now that George is no longer with us. And it requires a supermajority of 4 affirmative votes for the special permit. So this continuance will give them an opportunity to republish the special permit application so that Mary can join in as a voting member. So with that in mind, I think we should probably at least have a motion approving this continuance to the November 15th meeting. So unless there's any objection, would anyone care to make a motion to continue both of these public hearings to November 15th, 2023 at 7:15 PM via Zoom?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you. I think Peter, was there a second?
Second.
Mary, I
Second.
don't think you're eligible to vote on this.
Oh, whoops.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Woody.
Oops.
Any discussion? Then hearing none. Peter, how do you vote?
Yes.
Woody, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, we have a little time. Our next item on the agenda is the MVPC presentation regarding the MBTA multifamily communities zoning. If we have, I think we might have time to talk about 84 Boston Road. Do we have Kevin Whitney? Is he with us yet?
Not unless he's our call-in guest. Actually, maybe we go back to the 170 Orchard Street just for a second.
Of course.
The other item is that the current extension of time for action is till October 29th, and we will be getting an additional extension.
Okay, thank you, Martha.
To let everybody know.
Important to know. Well, I guess I don't want to start the MVPC presentation too soon because I'm sure are people tuning in to hear that. Martha, do you want to do the planning director's report?
I could do that unless we want to try to take up Steve. We've got about 12 minutes before the MBTA presentation is
All right,
happening.
yeah, we have
Otherwise,
Steve.
yeah, Steve, for
I know
105
he's
High.
here somewhere.
Yep.
All right, sure. Steve, do you want to talk about 105 High Road?
All righty. All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Kind of caught me. Thought I was going to have a little while. Yeah, so we're looking, there's a couple modifications we're looking for. We're hoping they're minor modifications. Number one, it's unit, I think it's unit 9. Unfortunately, if you give me a little bit, I can bring up the plans. I wasn't prepared, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, we took you a little bit by surprise by going.
Yeah,
down.
Steve, if you prefer, we can come back to you.
That's fine. Yeah, you know what? If I don't mind. I got other. If I could, that would work out great, and I can have everything ready if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
We'll probably need more than 10 minutes anyway, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So Martha, I guess we're back to the planner's report. We'll take you by surprise.
Right. So a few things for that. One is we are continuing to do a few final tweaks with Emily on the final draft of the master plan update. if you recall, we had been hoping to have it a couple of weeks ago, and we're planning to hold a special meeting on October 25th for the board to review it and potentially vote on it. We should have it by the end of this week. So for two reasons, it seems like October 25th may not be the best date. First, it doesn't give the board very long to review it. And second of all, that's actually the same evening as a Housing Choice Coalition meeting is happening. And I can imagine that there might be some people who would want to attend both. So the alternate suggestion would be to actually hold a special meeting on November 8th for them to discuss the master plan update and potentially vote on to adopt it. So wanted to put that out there and see if that was something that might work for the board members. Emily is available that night.
I'm available on the 8th. Peter, how about yourself?
Yep, it looks good right now. Yep.
Woody, you good for the
Yep.
November 8th?
Yep, I should be available on the 8th.
And Mary, how about you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So
I don't
you-
think we need a motion for this, do we, Martha? We'll simply
No.
plan on posting a special meeting for the 8th unless there's obviously some change.
Right, yeah, yeah. And as soon as we have that, the final draft, we will distribute it to all of you for your review.
Wonderful. Okay. And I'm
Um,
sorry, when did you say you expected to have that?
by the end of the week.
Okay.
And that's gonna be an evening meeting, I'm sorry.
That's what we were thinking, unless that's gonna be a problem for anybody. You know,
No, the
we're thinking
evening
of-
would be better for me.
okay, yeah, we're thinking 7 o'clock as usual.
Yeah, that was my expectation.
Great.
Okay.
So the second thing I wanted to report on is we did have the virtual housing meeting last Thursday, the 12th, which was held via Zoom, and it entailed both a sort of a regional, we had 6 communities there. There was a regional portion to it in the beginning, presenting data for the region. And then we broke out into breakout rooms for each community. And we had, I think we had about 35 people signed up to attend and maybe about 15 people who actually did attend. We had a good breakout session. Gerard Witten of MPPC reviewed the data specific information, or the specific information and data for Newbury. And then we started to have a conversation, or we had a conversation about some of the things that were uppermost in people's minds, including sort of balancing finding the balance between housing for, you know, our older residents who are interested in downsizing and families who are interested in coming into the community or would like to be here and there's no real appropriate housing for them. We did talk about the new kind of Newburyport based but regional housing choice coalition. There was some discussion about partnering with developers and what incentives there might be, you know, to reach certain thresholds. Suggestion had been made about allowing conversion of larger houses into multifamily units via special permit. What would be involved in forming an affordable housing trust and what their responsibilities would be. Talked about schools, Chapter 70 reimbursement and how that might tie in with housing, multifamily housing. So it was, you know, covered a lot of ground. There is going to be a follow-up in-person session, which is scheduled for Monday, December 11th in the evening, I think starting at 6:30. Kristen, is that right? At the library, in the community room at the library.
I think we're thinking 6:30. 6 o'clock seems a little hard in person, gives people a little time to eat dinner, but then in the winter, sometimes it's hard to stay out too late. So probably 6:30 to 8, but we'll let everybody know for sure.
So I'll be getting the word out on that. Some specific planning board business. Tom Z is, I think I've mentioned this previously, Tom Z is looking to close out his project. We're in the process of reviewing the record plan and it may be appropriate to schedule a site walk with the board to go out there and take a look at it before taking a final vote. I know he would like to release his performance guarantee. So we'll be targeting that for probably the November 1st meeting with the site walk before that, if possible. Scott Kinter also is looking to have his performance guarantee, the bond released and put in some cash towards the remaining performance guarantee. And I just received today from Doug DeShane the documents for the Gadsden Lane, Adam Drew's Gadsden Lane project. So I expect that will be on the agenda for the next meeting as well. And we have one A&R for a proposed lot line change that I expect will be at the next meeting. And I think that's all I have.
Okay, Martha, thanks.
Okay.
Still got a couple more minutes. You wanted, we can do minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the September 6th and September 20th meeting minutes?
Yes,
I'm seeing people nodding yes.
Yes.
Let's take them up one at a time. How about the September 6th, 2023 meeting minutes as presented? Is there any discussion on those? Would anyone care to make a motion to approve them as drafted?
I move to approve them.
Thank you, Mary. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Woody. Any discussion? Hearing none, then Pete, how do you vote?
Yes.
Woody, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary, how do you vote?
Yes,
I vote yes as well. And on the September 20th, 2023 meeting minutes, any discussion on those? Then hearing none, would anyone care to make a motion to approve those as drafted?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Woody. Is there a second?
second,
Thank you, Mary. Any discussion? Then hearing none, Pete, how do you vote?
Yes.
Woody, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary, how do you vote?
yes, and nice work. Thank
Yep.
you.
And I vote yes as well. So both of those meeting minutes are approved. And it's 7:27. Maybe we can, it's not too early to get things teed up for the MVPC presentation, Martha?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay, so we have Ian Burns and I'm sorry,
Kayla Rennie.
Kayla Rennie. Thank you. I missed my notes. So I'll just hand it over to the both of you. Ian, Kayla.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you all having us here today. My name is Ian Burns. I oversee the Community and Economic Development team at the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. Kayla, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kayla Rennie. I'm a Community and Economic Development Planner for the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. I've been working on this project with Martha and Kristen and Ian for a little while now, and looking forward to sharing with you all tonight.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a little bit of a presentation for you all today about the MBTA communities legislation. You all should be seeing my screen right now. If you can't, please let me know. So we're going to give a little bit of background on this legislation. I'm sure you've all heard about it before. And then we're going to talk a bit about some updates of what we've been working on with Martha and Kristen on finding some pathways, some potential options for Newbury to be in compliance with this legislation. So first, a brief agenda. What I'll mention up front, Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, for those who are unaware, I'm sure many of you are familiar with us, but if you're not, we support the planning initiatives in the 15 cities and towns of the Merrimack Valley. So that's pretty much every community from Lawrence, follow the Merrimack River all the way to the coast in Newburyport. We cover those 15 cities and towns in this northeast region of the state. So we're working with Newbury on 3A implementation, as well as about half the communities. We're doing really detailed hands-on work on this. So we are working in places like Boxford and Haverhill and everything in between on helping with compliance with this statute. So we have a pretty in-depth knowledge of what folks are doing and how they're approaching it. For today, what we're going to do first is take a little bit of a look at a background of where we're at with the MBTA communities legislation. It's also called 3A. You'll hear me use that interchangeably. MBTA communities or 3A. They're both the same thing. I'm going to take a quick look. We have two quick slides about some of Newbury's current housing conditions and their demographic data to kind of set the stage for how 3A could maybe help address some gaps that we've seen in town. And then we're going to go through the details of what exactly the regulations are calling for. I think some of you have seen a presentation on this in the past when the regulations initially came out. And so we're going to do a refresh, make sure everybody's on the same page. After we detail those regulations, I'm going to pause for any questions from the group here and get your feedback and questions about the regulations themselves before we move into an overview of Newbury's options for compliance, and then we'll have some discussion with you all. I will mention, feel free to speak up if you have questions throughout the presentation. Like I said, we'll purposely pause at a few sections, but feel free to let me know if there's a slide that you have some questions about before I continue. So just a quick background, you may be aware this legislation was passed really as a result of the housing crisis that was enacted the legislature back in 2021. It applies to every city and town that either has an MBTA transit stop or is adjacent to a community that has an MBTA transit stop. The goal is to address the Massachusetts housing shortage, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. It requires communities subject to law to zone for multifamily housing as of right. And something I want to emphasize right up front is when we talk about this legislation and the regulations, we're talking about zoning specifically. We're not talking about construction. And so anytime we mention unit capacity or mention land mass, whatever that looks like, we're talking zoning only. We're not talking actual construction of units, which is not required as part of this law. So I mentioned the housing crisis. You've probably heard it discussed both in the Boston Globe, recently an article today, or otherwise. The state right now has a pretty extreme shortage of housing units, and that's caused quite a skyrocketing number of prices on both the ownership front and the rental front. That chart at the bottom shows the building permits issued, the housing production in Massachusetts over the past 60 years. And we like to bring this forward to demonstrate, from 1960 to 1990, that 30-year period, we're producing a lot of units of housing. And then from 1990 to today not today, but up until 2020, that 30-year period, you see quite a significant reduction in the amount of units being produced. And so that from a data perspective, when we look at it, we see much less supply, still a pretty high demand, is resulting in our extreme housing cost spike. And so as a result of that, the state's trying to increase supply of housing and has brought them to this legislation here today. An important thing to emphasize that we always like to talk about is a lot of this legislation is focused on what we refer to as missing middle housing. So as we'll talk about later on, the regulations require multifamily housing or zoning for multifamily housing that would likely produce this type of missing middle housing. So we're not talking about detached single family homes on the left, and we're not talking about mid to high rise apartment buildings on the right. This is getting at that type of housing that a lot of folks mentioned they need more of or are missing, smaller units, usually in a duplex, triple decker, cottage style, townhouse, maybe 2, 3, or 4 stories tall. That middle bracket of housing that a lot of our communities are missing in terms of the smaller bedroom counts and more densely packed together for easier access to amenities. So the kind of zoning that we're looking at is really getting in at that missing middle. And so what do I mean when I say missing middle, and why are we saying that we're missing a middle? This is a look at Newbury's current housing stock as compared to the occupants in those housing units. And so on the left, we see a housing breakdown by occupancy. So who is living in household units? On the right, we see the size of those household units. And so one of the things we like to point out is, as you can see in Newbury, 1 or 2 person households make up 60% of Newbury's homes. However, 1 or 2 bedroom homes only make up 28% of Newbury's housing stock. Compare that to 3 or more person households, which make up about 40% of Newbury's homes, while 3 or more bedroom homes make up 72% of Newbury's housing stock. So when I say missing middle, I'm talking about that gap between the occupants in a household and the number of bedrooms, the size of that household. Now, we certainly expect that there's going to be a mismatch in every community. We see it across the board, and that's pretty normal. You have empty nesters that aren't looking to downsize yet or aren't looking to move out of their house. However, when we see this significant of a mismatch, we know that folks don't have a choice to downsize if they're looking to do so. So that's kind of what we're thinking about when we think about missing middle and where are folks living and do they have options to downsize or go into the right size housing that they might be looking for. And then this one other data point, we wanted to pull up our distribution projections. So you may have seen some of this. I think a little bit might be highlighted in your master plan process. I'm not sure, but this takes a look at what we're expecting the different age brackets in Newbury to change over time. As you can see, that blue line there is the 65 plus population. From 2010 to 2040, it's more than doubling in size, or projected to more than double in size. And from 2020 today to 2040, it is even expected to go up, about 15 percentage points. And compare that to all the other age demographics where we're seeing it decrease. That is a sign that we need to think about housing needs for our older residents in our community. And a lot of times what that might mean is a different type of housing than what you might have in the community today. So do they need to look to downsize? Are they aging in place, aging in community? How can we ensure that they have access to the housing that they need? At the same time, when we see such a reduction in younger populations, we have to think about how are we going to pull in new families and younger residents so we can keep a pretty even spread of age groups across the community. And one of the things that we see is that when older folks can't downsize, they're sitting in their larger home, which prevents a new family from moving into that single family home. So thinking about how can we create a better downstream effect of housing options for residents and for future residents. In that background, I want to give you a little bit of details on what this legislation is specifically calling for, what the regulations are. Like I said, after we go through these next few slides, I'll pause and make sure that everybody's on the same page before we talk about Newbury specifically, but here's some details on what's required for the town. So as I mentioned before, this is requiring communities to zone for multifamily housing as of right in a certain district of their town. A few specifics about what's required here. There can't be any age restrictions on the units, and there can't be any bedroom size restrictions on the units. The minimum gross density has to be at least 15 units per acre. I'll show a little bit about what that means in a minute. And then for communities that are near a commuter rail station, or have a commuter rail station, I should say, they have to be within half a mile of a commuter rail station. But for Newbury specifically, that's not applicable because of your town's classification. It can be anywhere in town, but it is encouraged that it is close or has access to the nearest transit station. And so for you all, that would be the Newburyport commuter rail station on the north end of town. To give you context of the whole Merrimack Valley region, like I said, we're working across a lot of these cities and towns. Newbury over on the eastern edge here is classified as an adjacent small town. These different color coordinations show you what type of community they are designated as. As an adjacent small town, Newbury has less zoning requirements than the other communities across the region. You can see just to your north, Newburyport, and just to your south, Raleigh, are commuter rail communities because they have a commuter rail stop. And then communities like Amesbury, Salisbury, North Andover are adjacent communities because they're next to a community with a commuter rail stop, and they have a bit higher of a population than Newbury has. So what does that mean as an adjacent small town? So the top bullet here details exactly how they classify who gets to be an adjacent small town and who isn't. So Newbury fits the data points mentioned in that first bullet. As with every community classification, the zoning has to allow for up to 15 units per acre of housing. The zoning has to have has to allow for a capacity of multifamily units equal to 5% of the community's housing stock. In Newbury, on the bottom, you can see that we bolded there. Newbury is required to zone for up to 154 units. Again, we're talking zoning, not actual building of those units. Like I mentioned before, this district, because you're in an adjacent small town, can be located anywhere in town, but it's encouraged to have reasonable access to a transit station. In context, these are all the communities that we work in as the Planning Commission. So just to show you where Newbury kind of stacks up compared to its neighbors, you can see on the right there, Newbury's requirement of that 154 minimum units tends to be on the lower side compared to a lot of its neighbors, where on the high end, we have Lawrence, which is required to zone for over 4,000 units. And on the lowest end, we have West Newbury, which is required to zone for 87 units. So Newbury is in that kind of lower bracket compared to a lot of the communities that we see in our region in terms of their zoning requirements. So I mentioned 15 units per acre earlier, and I wanted to give you a little bit of a concept of what we mean by that and what it could look like in a community where a lot of times we think about those mid-rise buildings that I showed earlier, which we're not talking about right now, or a lot of times folks tend to be concerned that we're going to see some pretty large scale developments and some high developments. You know, they look at what's happening inside of the 128 belt right now in the Boston area and are afraid that's going to be creeping out. One thing we want to emphasize is that 15 units per acre doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be squeezing a lot in a small amount of space. So I pulled forward here a couple of examples, some from nearby communities, some from other places in the state, that show what is actually 15 units per acre. So you can get an idea of when we put certain zoning restrictions on it, we don't necessarily have to be looking at a 4-story building. That top example is a group of townhouses that was newly constructed in downtown Georgetown on 97. If you drive through downtown there, you'll see them kind of set back from 97. The bottom right is in North Andover, and this is a recent reconstruction of a unit. And so this is, although it's only 6 units, it meets the density of 15 units per acre because it's such a small parcel. And so when you have 6 units on a really small parcel, that is also a density that hits that requirement. The bottom left is an example in Natick, Massachusetts. You can see it's a little bit of a more multi-structured development and a little bit of a higher building height, but it's set back from the road and also meets that density requirement of 15 units per acre. It's actually, I think that development there is about 20 units per acre. And so a lot of times we see developments that are more than that, and giving you some context for how it doesn't always have to be, I think, what a lot of folks are concerned about affecting the character of their communities and what it might look like in the long run. I'm going to show you 2 more slides, or maybe it's 3 more, just to give you a timeline, and I'm going to pause for some questions here. So to give you an idea of the timeline here in Newbury, on the left, those are a bunch of things that have already been accomplished by the town. So right now the town is in what the state has called interim compliance, where you have accomplished the steps along the way. I'm sorry, on the left there, and then on the right is the target for the town. As an adjacent small town, you have until December 2025 to be in compliance. However, as we've been talking with Martha and Kristen and others in the town, right now we're targeting to bring a zoning bylaw to the May 2024 annual town meeting. That way we have some extra time. If the town meeting does not vote to approve it, we have another year to go back to the drawing board and figure out if there's a different way to get you all to compliance. So right now we're targeting May 24, although we have until December 25 to get you to compliance. And then the other grayed out things on there are for community deadlines that don't apply to Newbury. So some of your neighbors that are commuter rail communities have only until December of 2024 to be in compliance. Why do we need to comply? What's the penalties if we don't? There's a whole host of grant programs that the state has said you will either be ineligible for, or the town will be less competitive when applying for if you are not in compliance. So there's a bunch of grants listed on the state's website that they say they will take compliance into consideration when awarding funding. There are a couple that the legislation specifically calls out, which I've listed there, and then there's about 13 others within the regulations that we haven't listed here, but that the town may be at risk for not receiving if it's not in compliance after December 2025. As you'll see in bold, the state has also made very clear that they will consider compliance in pretty much any type of grant application that may touch housing. And right now in the state of Massachusetts, pretty much everything does touch housing because of the state that our housing conditions are in. And so as the Planning Commission that's trying to help you all get access to the resources that you need, our concern is that there's a lot of programs you may lose funding, you may not have access to if you're not in compliance. So what we want to do is give you some options to compliance. Ultimately, your town meeting has the final say, your residents do. They can either approve it or not. I want to show you how you can get there if the town wants to get there and decides to go down that path. As you'll also notice on the bottom, the Attorney General has released guidance saying the law is not option. They have floated that there may be civil litigation for communities that do not comply. And so on top of grant access to different grant programs, there could be litigation down the line for communities that do not comply. So I'm going to pause right there, see if there's questions from the board. I blew through those regulations relatively quickly, but I don't want to gloss over anything if you have clarifying questions about what's required of the town right now.
Ian, I do have one, and perhaps I hope I'm not getting ahead of you, but can you talk about the affordable housing component to the zoning bylaw?
Certainly. So you cannot require affordable housing to a certain extent within this bylaw. There are some options if the town would like to require up to 10% of units be designated as affordable. There are some things, some technical steps we have to take to prove that that's allowed for the town and that the town has it's economically feasible for those units to be produced. However, if there is a way to get up to 10% of the units required affordable, we can find a path to do that it may require a separate bylaw passed by the town to pass inclusionary zoning or something like that across the community, which I can talk about in details. But it's allowed. It takes some extra steps to get there. Is essentially my summary of that.
Okay, so it's, all right, thank you. I think that answers my question. Anyone else have any questions for Ian or Kayla at this point?
I just have one clarification, and unfortunately, I didn't catch this when we were going through the slides. I think the Maytown or the Springtown meeting is more likely to be in April. I think we're looking at April 23rd or April 30th right now. That's my mistake. I didn't catch that. So just a clarification.
Good to know. Thank you, Martha. All right.
Can I just ask
Well,
something,
go ahead.
Larry?
No, that was it. Thank you.
What is the avenue for pushing back against any of these regulations or zoning regulations or demands that these guidelines be met? Is there any? Are you working with some kind of a pipeline that comes from communities where they, dispute?
Yeah, so we've at the beginning, about a year ago, the state came out with draft regulations. And those initial regulations did not have a separate category for rural and small towns like Newbury. And so we worked with both the state and a lot of small towns and our partners across the region to advocate for changes to that. Originally, it was calling for Newbury to zone for up to 750 units, if you remember the first draft of the regulations. Fortunately, the regulations were changed after some advocacy on behalf of the towns and partly our conversations with folks on the state level. And so that's why that number has significantly been reduced to about 150 units. At this time, although we talk with the state pretty regularly of what we're hearing on the ground and concerns that towns have, at this time, we're trying to help folks find ways to comply to leave it up their town meeting to vote on compliance. However, if the planning board or other members of the town want to have a conversation with the state about concerns that are being required of you, we can pass on some contact information for folks to get in touch with. We are not in the position to partner with you on advocating for changes specifically for the town, unless there was like a specific problem with the way they defined you in the letter of the law. The regulations as they are right now seem to be pretty set, and seems like there may be minimal changes down the line.
So Ian, for the town of Newbury, planning board director and others pushed back in a nice way against the numbers that had been set up. And that is an option for other communities like Newbury, similar to Newbury in size, et cetera, if they feel that it's too dense a requirement.
So you're certainly welcome to voice that to the state and to the administration. We work regularly with folks at the department that enforces the regulations, and we can information to get in touch with folks at the state if you are concerned about what's being required of the town. We do not at this point advocate for changes in the actual density requirement or the numbers. As I mentioned, we did that after the first round of regulations were announced. And we can help facilitate and give you some tools if you want to talk to the state about it and give you some feedback on your approach there, but we don't necessarily facilitate a change in your actual requirements, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Ian.
Yep, and I might be able to address a little bit of that as you guys all recall, and as Ian mentioned, the initial requirement for Newbury was to zone for 750 units. And we were required to place those units, most of those units within, half a mile of the Newburyport commuter rail station. We wrote our letter expressing our concerns, especially about lack of water and sewer infrastructure and environmental constraints in that area. And many other communities did too. I can't remember how many letters were actually received. There was a regional letter that we also participated in. So I think, I think to my mind, the new regulations, as they were finally put forward, were really responsive to a lot of the concerns that we raised. As Ian noted, our requirement now is 154 units. So if you think about that in the context of, say, This is not a good example for density, but number of units. Caldwell Farm is about 66 units. So we're looking at, development of, a little less than 3 times that. And there's no requirement to put it all within half a mile of the train station. We can put it anywhere where we feel it's appropriate, although they are still encouraging it to be within some reasonable distance of the transit if possible. And again, this is not a requirement for this, for the town to construct these units. It doesn't actually represent a build out analysis of any particular parcel. It's just kind of in a sense, an abstract target number that we're looking at. So I don't know. I don't know if that helps clarify it, but it's certainly, quite a change from what we were looking at when we originally, got the original guidelines, and at which time we were required to do almost a quarter, 25% of our total housing stock as multifamily, and now it's 5%. So quite a difference.
And I'll mention too, I think sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I mean, Larry, am I supposed to go through you, or can I speak?
No, go ahead, Mary.
Ian, the reason I brought that up, and I was grateful to Martha for spearheading the effort to bring people to the table to discuss the 750 units, and in a way, without sounding too harsh, the absurdity of that for a town like Newbury. Some of these compliance regulations seem a bit frightening to just the average citizen, the average resident. So I was just wondering what that venue was to go up and say, hey guys, we don't think this is fair. And there is one, and it was good to hear there is one. It's not just boom, this is it, take it or leave it, you guys, you're marching, you're out of here. Yeah, certainly. And I certainly understand there's a lot of apprehension about this. It's a change. It's a relatively significant change from what we've seen in communities. I grew up in North Andover. I played a lot of sports in Byfield and Newbury. I've been in this region my whole life, so I know what folks are used to, and I know that it's not easy to think about what the differences might be with these regulation changes. And so I'm with you on the concerns, and so I'm glad to hopefully help guide and see how we can get there. And then ultimately, like we've said, it's up to the residents. And so we'll see what the options are out there, and hopefully we can find something that might work. If not, that's the residents can determine that. Thanks.
Ian, you comfortable taking a question from a member of the public?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, Steve Mangione has his hand up.
Hi, this is Steve Mangione on Plum Island. And I think Martha, as well as Mary, raised some interesting questions. I'm curious, can you comment on, well, 2 things. One is that, the law was the law, yet now the regulations have changed about going from, many hundreds of units to 154. And I found myself wondering what's the basis for that, since I would think the law didn't anticipate these regulatory changes. And related to that is also, I often find myself wondering what happens if a town or city says, no, we don't want to play. What are the real economic impacts of not being able to get some of the grants? But I'm first of all really curious about how the regulations do not seem to line up with what was originally advertised as what the law required cities and towns to do. I'm very sensitive to environmental implications out here in Newbury, where water and sewer and soil conditions are not exactly favorable to, multifamily dense packed residences. And I'm sorry for speaking on, and now I'll be quiet.
Sure. Let me see if I can address a couple of those questions. First, with the regulations changing and how they comply with what the statute says. So the statute, which was passed by the legislature, the actual law that was signed by Governor Baker, all it really says is that a district has to be of, quote, reasonable size within a community. And it specifies the density, 15 units per acre, and it says has to be of reasonable size. And so the legislature really left it up to the administration to interpret what that is and write those regulations. So the Baker administration wrote the first draft of the regulations and then a revised draft. And now, of course, Governor Healy was elected and is doing a lot of the enforcement of really a lot of the regulations that the Baker administration wrote. And so the statute was pretty general that the legislature passed and left a lot up for interpretation for governors' administrations to decide on. In terms of the water and sewer impacts, one of the things, the reason we keep emphasizing that this is not a construction mandate is because we know that in a town like Newbury, it may not be possible for a developer to build 15 units per acre because of, let's just say, for the sewer reasons. They might not be able to put in a septic system that can accommodate that. The state knows that too, and they've said, that's okay. If the zoning exists, but a developer says can't be done, that's not a problem. And so we know that in towns like Newbury, we've been talking about it in towns like Foxford and others, we know that they're going to put this zoning in place. And if you see development out of it, it's very likely the development will be smaller scale than what some other communities may see with public water, sewer, et cetera, simply because the environmental conditions are different. And so that's up to the developer and what's economically feasible for them to do. And in addition to that, all of the current environmental laws are in place for any development that would come in here. They don't get to build this on a wetland and supersede any restrictions there.
Okay, thank you, Ian.
I want to be conscious of time. I know that you had scheduled me for a half hour and I'm coming up against it here. And I wanted to show you some examples of districts that we could talk about. Is it okay with the chair and the board if we go a little bit over? I'm not sure how you would like to run things here.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple things. I just skip past one or two slides. What I'll mention that was in those is really thinking about how we then go forward and talk about these districts and how we choose to place them. The state has provided us with this big spreadsheet that we call the compliance model. I'm not going to go into the details of what it is. Essentially, we have a tool that allows us to input all of the parcels that we're considering for your districts. And then it allows us to put in numbers for the dimensional criteria, things like the height restrictions, the parking requirements, the setback requirements. And the tool calculates based off of the parcels that we put in and the zoning requirements we put in place, what could be feasible to be built in that area. And when I say feasible to be built, again, it's not a build out analysis, it's giving some theoretical numbers to tell us if we're in compliance with that unit capacity and density. So every time we talk about these districts, we're plugging these numbers into a spreadsheet and seeing if we can get Newbury close to compliance with that. And that's how we track the compliance of the town. A few things that we consider, like I mentioned before, acreage. Is there developable land there? When I say developable land, I only mean things that are not environmentally constrained or not public land. If there's a structure on that parcel, that's totally fine because again, there's only the zoning is required, not building. So if there's a structure there, we can still zone over it. It's still considered developable. Of course, that structure would have to go if they ever built something. So it doesn't matter if something might not be built in the next 5, 10, 20 years. Location proximate to transit access, if there's maybe any walkability or pedestrian access and access to commercial centers. We're trying to think of where it makes sense to put housing in your community if we're going to be zoning for housing. I'm going to show you some maps in a second, so you're not just going to see this in words. But as a reminder, we're looking at overlay districts here. So underlying zoning is still in effect. Essentially, a developer could choose whether they're going to follow the regulations set forth in the overlay district or if they're going to follow whatever the underlying zoning is. The two areas of town that we've been looking at right now, and I'll mention it's very fluid. We could take some options, leave some options for what I'm going to present to you all today. What we're calling Newbury North, and there's an A and B section of that. This is the area near the Newburyport border along Route 1 and near Hanover Street. And then we're calling Newbury South along Kentway. For all the districts, we've been mapping out some potential dimensional requirements for the bylaw just to get a start and see if we can get you to compliance. These are the numbers, I should say, we've been plugging in. So minimum lot size, 40,000 square feet, about close to an acre. Maximum building height of 3 stories. We've been playing around with this. Some districts we might go lower than 3 stories. It might be 2, 2.5, depending on what we look at. Right now, we're looking at about a 50-foot front yard setback, 25-foot side yard setbacks, maximum lot coverage of 50%, minimum open space, which I think is important to emphasize, we're still looking at a 40% open space requirement. And parking across all the units, we're looking at an average of 1.5 spaces. I say average because for a 1-bedroom, we might require 1 space. For a 2 to 3 bedroom, we might require 2 spaces. And so that's kind of the average that it calculates out to be. That's kind of a baseline of what we think about for dimensional requirements. Happy to chat and get feedback on those shortly, because I know these are important. But that's what we're looking at right now. We can change those as we move this process along. And with those requirements, we can get you to compliance in these districts that we're mentioning. I'm going to zoom in shortly. Just wanted to give you context of the entire town. What we're looking at is a relatively small percentage of actual land area. So that red circle on the top, that's that North District I was talking about. You have Route 1 here, and then Hanover Street over here, and then down over here you have town offices, Kent Way, that Newbury South. Commuter rail stations up here. And that's the areas that we're looking at. In these red circles, these pink overlay districts are the actual parcels that we're considering. I'm going to zoom in so you can see all those separately in just a second here, but wanted to give you context for the whole town. This is that Newbury North area we're considering. You can see up at the top to orient you, you have the border with Newburyport and the commuter rail station. We have what we're calling A and then what we're calling B. The reason we're separating them right now is because we want to allow to change the dimensional requirements if you want differences between the two. Knowing that these are different neighborhoods, even though they're close together, they're in relatively different settings from each other. We want to be able to play with the dimensional requirements. So right now we're treating them as 2 separate overlay districts. I'm going to zoom in even closer to each of them and tell you a little bit about how we've chosen these areas. First, this sub-district A. One of the things we like about it is that it's close to the Newburyport commuter rail station, as we mentioned earlier. At the commuter rail station, we have access to the Clipper City Rail Trail for bike and pedestrian use and access to the train. It's along a major transportation route on Route 1 for efficient access and transportation options. Smaller parcels here may create what we refer to as gentle density. So those examples I showed you earlier of some of the smaller structures that meet these requirements, with smaller parcels, we're more likely to see smaller scale development than large scale development. So we like how this is made up of a good chunk of smaller parcels. There's also potential for pedestrian connections to Newbury Elementary. And we also see this as a gateway to the town. If you're coming south from Newburyport, this is your first entry into Newbury. Are there options for different types of sight lines or exposure to the town when you first come in? This is that sub-district B along Hanover Street. Similar reasons to the other one as to why we like it. Relatively smaller parcels. I think these are about 7-8 acres, 2 of them, and then the other one is about half of that. We like its walking distance to both the elementary school and the Upper Green. And again, it's near the Newburyport commuter rail station. So it fits kind of those criteria for what we're looking for in amenities being near housing. The last area we're looking at in town right now, as we're calling Newbury South, is this 10-acre parcel where the strip mall is, where the town offices are right now. And so this, for a couple of reasons we like. One, it's easily accessible to I-95. People can get in and out pretty quickly if there's a housing development there. And it's walkable to Byfield Center. So people have access to retail, the post office, the library, and the community arts center, all within a short walk, which makes it a lot easier for folks to get around and reduces car trips if people are going somewhere in a center of the community. Those are the 3 that we're looking at right now, and we've been considering. We really want to hear thoughts from the planning board on these 3 spots. I'm happy to scroll back and forth between the slides and show you them in detail, maybe look at those dimensional requirements again, and get your initial thoughts and feedback on what you're thinking of how this could shape up in the community. Happy to take questions or comments on that from the board.
Okay. Well, let me turn to the members again. Any questions or comments? A lot to think about here, that's for sure.
We
Larry?
will be sending.
I heard a voice. I'm not sure who it was.
Hi, Larry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pete, go ahead.
Ian, first, thanks for the presentation this evening. And thank you for the efforts on trying to identify what parcels make the most sense to try to bring this to our town meeting. I think that these are very good options. that have been discussed. I think they make sense for a lot of reasons. And I think it's a positive needle to be pointing our compass in. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I was going to mention, we're going to send this, or Martha and Kristen both have this PowerPoint. So folks on the planning board, you can get this again if you want to review it and ask more questions later on. It's a lot of content.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm sorry, Larry, I cut you off. I apologize.
No, go ahead, Mary.
The graphics are terrific, and I would love to have a copy. And also, Larry, I'd like to propose that the planning board have a chance to get together to discuss this at length. There isn't a lot of time now. We're jamming stuff in, and there's a lot at play here, and we could probably crash through it quickly. But I think that might help out. That's just my thought on it.
No, I think you're right. I think we've got a lot of steps to take yet before we're ready to present something to town meeting, including, you know, getting a full understanding of it. And like I said, there's quite a bit here to absorb. But I think this is a great approach.
Yeah.
I agree with Peter's comments.
It's very well thought through.
And we're happy to, if you all, you know, want to talk about it at a separate board meeting with with yourselves and the planning board and Martha and Kristen and strategize together. If you want us there to provide feedback, we're happy to be there as well. So just keep us updated on how engaged you want us through those conversations too.
Great, wonderful. Martha, anything else for Ian and Kayla before we let them go?
I just have up here some next steps we're looking at right now. We're continuing to meet and refine those parameters. Nope, this is it. I just wanted to let you know that, you know, we're not, you know, leaving after this. And so we're still going to be meeting and refining the parameters. Our next step really is, as we're talking about potential districts, start drafting that bylaw language. And eventually, once we get some good ideas of where this could be and what those dimensional requirements look at, we'll be bringing to you all a draft zoning bylaw amendment for you all to look at and give us feedback on.
Wonderful. That'd be great.
Martha, Kristen, anything I missed?
No, I think you covered it well. I think it's a great suggestion to actually get together and kind of have a workshop on this. You know, maybe we would do that in person, up to the board, obviously. And that might be a time to kind of go into more detail about some of the considerations for the different districts that we're actually looking at here.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Martha. An in-person workshop, I think, could be very valuable.
I think it would mean a lot to the town if we really drill down on this on their behalf. The planning board, in other words, it's our job, and it needs to be. We need to talk. We need to get together.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lot. You know, I think that's a great idea because there are a lot of considerations. And so I think it deserves a lot of good attention. I think that would be terrific.
Okay.
All right, Martha. Well, we can talk about that offline and see if we can set something up.
Yep, that sounds great.
Well, thank you all so much for having us here today. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. Happy to have follow-up questions at any time or talk to you all. We'll be in constant communication with Martha and Kristen about it. So I'm sure you'll hear from us again in the future. Thank you.
I hope so. And thank you both. This has been extremely helpful.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So back to, the next item on the agenda is 84 Boston Road. We haven't seen anyone yet from KNR.
No, I emailed Kevin. I have not heard back from him. The call-in user hasn't identified him or herself, but I'm assuming it's not Kevin. Otherwise, he would have spoken up. So I'm not quite sure, you know, if the board would like to table this or have a discussion.
Why don't we table it so we can hear from them? And I'd suggest we move on to 105 High Road.
Okay, we do have one member of the public, Katie Bordenaro, who would like to speak.
Sure.
I don't know if it's about 84 Boston or something else.
Katie, go ahead. Yeah. I think you're muted. Okay, well, hold that thought, and
Oops.
if you can figure it out, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, and unfortunate, we don't have the chat function on our Zoom, so we can't use that to help with that.
Is that what the little bubble comes up and words go into it?
Right, right. It says she's connecting to audio now, so maybe.
Okay.
We'll give it another second.
Great. Next.
Gotta love Zoom sometimes. Still connecting.
Is it star 7 to unmute, Martha?
I think it's 6, *6. Hold
Oh,
on.
it's in the intro,
I know. You'd think,
which I've read 1,000 times and probably.
I know.
absorbed.
Yeah, it's *6 to mute or unmute
Okay,
on your phone. So Katie, you're also calling user one. Is that? Got it. So if you'd like to speak, I think if you toggle *6, you should be
No,
able.
it's okay. Don't worry about
oh,
it.
we can hear
We
you
can
now.
hear you.
Oh, I just wanted to let you know that I was calling user one because you were wondering if it was someone else. I was just trying to help out on that question. So
Oh.
I don't know why you couldn't hear me before. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Wait,
All right, Mr. Sawyer, where are you?
I think I'm unmuted.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. First of all, my condolences to all you guys, the board. I didn't realize George had passed. That's very sad. I missed that discussion. I kind of came in halfway through. He was such a thoughtful and great person. I always enjoyed his thought. He was always a pleasure. So he'll be
He
missed.
was, thank you. Thank you for
Missed.
the kind words.
Also, actually that MVPC, that was very. I'm glad I waited. That was enlightening. The problem with those areas, I'll tell you right now, the problem with those areas is going to be soils. The soils are horrible there. Never going to get any kind of density unless he can get some sort of connection to Newburyport, low pressure sewer or something. There's nothing, really no way Newbury can support any of that density at all, except maybe, the only place that has soils is up on high, high, that kind of sandy terrace up on high, but it's going to be a tough one. You guys, a lot of work ahead of you on that one.
Yeah, well, we don't have to see that anything's built there. We just have to.
He's on it. Yeah. And let
Yeah.
somebody figure it out. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So, all right. Here on behalf of, actually it's Maggie DePiero now. She's, overseeing the project along with a lot of help, from Ben Perez and, who is Mark's nephew. But so they're looking to basically, they got one more foundation to get in. It's lot 9. So I think what I can do is I can share the lot 9. They're looking to drop that by 2.5 feet. There's also some trees up there that they're all dying, and I guess it's the ash, some sort of ash borer beetle, or like Mike Hathaway sent in a letter on it. I guess there's some sort of beetle that started out in I think it was a Worcester area. They tried to control it. It's spreading. So unfortunately, the ash trees are all in peril. And he said it wasn't, we hadn't cut that slope back until recently, and they're already dying. So I guess it's that emerald borer beetle or some sort of beetle that's
The emerald ash borer. I actually
there
had
we
to
go.
have I had to have 18 trees removed on my property last year because the ash borer just destroyed all of them.
Yeah.
Ditto. Ditto, we saved one.
Yeah. So so the issue here is, okay, those trees we're gonna save for a buffer, those trees are all gonna be dead. So now we're looking to cut those trees down and replant. I think Mike had come up with some sort of just a general plan of how to handle it. We'd provide more detail in the future, depending if it's acceptable that we do take those trees. But I think at this point, is it okay to share?
Yeah, please, it'd be helpful.
Yep, you should be able to.
Let's see, share. All right. Can everyone see?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so here's unit 9. So this, when Ben got into it, they started excavating, and there was quite an elevation difference between 9 and 8. And so as we got into it and looking at it, he felt it made more sense to drop this building, which it would definitely integrates better with here, pushes the building down as far as any view from High Road and properties up above. So it does reduce any impact of the building view by pushing it down. But along with that, the grading actually works. We do end up raising. So originally, you can see here, in the sort of faint red was the last approved location of the wall. And what we're looking to do is push it back a little bit. Actually, Martha was out there, and we were looking at, it was pretty tight to the building, particularly there's a pinch point here, just to give a little space between this area and where we're actually going to be, where these trees are dying and we'd like to take them, we could push the wall back a little further and replant this area. So currently the neighbor up above is encroaching quite a bit. You can see there's the existing fence, which we are planning to remove, and we're not looking to pull the fence back. We're going to maintain that fence line and not look to remove them and replace the fence back to the property line, so he still can keep that land or use of that land. But these trees would all come down, and then we'd replant on this area. And then, we'd install the wall and then revegetate and replant this area with a mix of, right now it's mostly deciduous. Up there, I think it's all deciduous. And really the only green up there now is, I think it's some invasive that's crawling up the trees. You have some invasive species crawling up the trees there. So that's the only buffer that we're seeing. And so we're looking to do that. The wall did grow a little bit. Actually, where the wall now is, I think we're looking at a maximum height here. The bottom, so you get the bottom wall at 41.5, and then the top of wall at 45.83. So it's just like a little bit over 4 feet there, 4.3 or whatever. So it's roughly still a smaller wall. So we'd be looking at the large block wall, sort of, it's like a split granite face. I think Mark's intention, I think back then, I think we were always calling it as a block wall, but he was hoping to do some fancier looking sort of poured in place with a veneer surface and such to dress it up. But at this point, Ben's just looking to go back and just do the block wall, the block type wall. So the proposal at hand, the change we're looking at is, number 1, remove and replant. Number 2, realign the wall slightly here. And then number 3 would be to drop the building by 2.5 feet. It's still, we maintain the drainage. There's less of a slope between, there's a little bit of it gets a little tight here. This point here, at this high point, we got a 0.5% that grades this way and a 0.5% that grades this way, but it's all lawn. So it's whatever doesn't seep in the lawn will just slowly bleed across the grass and around the building, and then into the swale this way, and then into the driveway and into the drainage system that way. So that's the proposal at that location. And I think we had another, let's see, did that jump to the other PDF or not?
This jumped to your letter.
Okay, to jump to the letter. Also, so that covers that.
So we move on. there were also the trees along the southern property line at that corner that
Oh,
there
okay,
was some
hold on.
suggestion from Mike to do something with, and also we looked at the swale that was
Yeah.
along the southern property line.
I think, yeah, so, yeah, so one of these, there was, I think there was one tree that was dead in this area. There was no foliage at all, which would become a hazard. So I think that in Mike's letter was just be looking to remove that dead tree. I'm not sure which one it is in here, but there's no foliage on it. It's completely dead. Some of these trees, we would maintain the healthy trees, but there'd be some limbing up. There was some limbs that needed to be addressed in the lower, the lower area of the tree, but the larger trees would be maintained at that location. I think that compromised tree was one of these two here, I believe. I think it might be this one here. But I'm not, we didn't do this. GM2 didn't do the survey. This was given to us, so I'm relying on the other survey. But I believe it's somewhere around the corner of this fence at that location was that other tree. And then as far as the swale, the swale, while it doesn't fall the exact location, it does kind of slides out a little bit and runs down. There was an area that I think there was one area where the side slope was a little bit, I think it was 2.5. It was 2.5 to 1, not 3 to 1 horizontal. And Joe had mentioned that they're looking, they do have the room. I think it was, hold on a sec.
I think it was behind Unit 10.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere in this area here, and they're going to flatten it out. There was a cut slope that was a little steep, and they're going to flatten it out. But so this swale still is going to be constructed. It may not be the perfectly as shown as the, we had indicated as a 2 foot wide, then 8 inch deep. It was 6 foot wide form swale, but given the topography, it's sort of more, it sort of follows the topography, but the swale will direct the water down to the infiltration basin. And I think other than Joe's comment regarding the side slope at that one area, he was okay with what we were doing there, Martha. I think you can, if you hear differently, let me know.
Yep.
Okay.
Will do.
All right. So that covers that area. So we're not asking to, I think at one point Mark was thinking about piping the swale at one point, which at this point we're not looking to do that. But it's going to be an open channel flow. And there really isn't a tremendous amount of water that flows down there, given we have the infiltration diaphragms around the foundation, the drip lines around the foundations and such. And right now we're probably see the most flow that we would see. And we had quite an extensive rainy season this past summer. And given the fact that we have a disturbed site with no vegetation, I think once everything gets vegetated, that swale is not going to see a tremendous amount of water, but it will prevent water from flowing off site to the south onto the Colby property. And that's the intent of the swale. And I think it's built to maintain that design intent. So I will go back to, all right, the other item is patio. So one thing that was added, so all the homes have they've added patios to their exclusive use areas on the nine units in the back, 9 homes in the rear. So each patio is only 200 square feet. It's 1,800 square feet total of impervious area. The impact is minimal. It's a 0.5% increase of impervious area over the entire site. And given the de minimis increase of impervious area, we don't think there's any issue with it, with adding those. These are all within the exclusive use area, not in the common area. And I'm not, that's something that I guess I'm not sure how it's been handled in the past, is, given these, all, whether it's a fee simple, whether it's everyone has their own lot, or if it's an exclusive use area, in the past, how the planning board has addressed these issues when people come in and want to make an improvement in their exclusive use or lot area, that it was part of an OSRD special permit. I'm not sure if there's any, additional controls put on them. in the past or not, but with these small patios, there's no impact as far as drainage. What's on site is more than enough to handle what we're seeing. In fact, that given the very permeable nature of the soils, we've seen very little water. Actually, very little water even makes it to the right now makes it to that infiltration basin. Given there are silt sacks and such, and in the catch basins, but once the water still passes through the drainage system and into that infiltration basin, and I don't think to date it's even come close to overtopping and running out the controlled outlet structure. So these added patios in the exclusive use areas are de minimis, and I don't think have any impact or have no impact. So, and then finally, getting back to how the planning board is looking to handle improvements on the exclusive use areas, or i.e. lots that were created as part of an OSRD special permit. So lot 4, so lot 4, they're looking to add a pool. They'd like to have a pool. They're one of the lots that have enough room to have a pool. So it's in this area here. This is the area they'd like to have a pool. And that's basically, it's within their exclusive use area here, no impact, screened. And then you have a patio around it, and any of this water would end up flowing into this basin, which is more than ample to handle the stormwater from that area. One thing I will say is that, I've been doing this a long time, that given particularly infiltration facilities as part of stormwater, and especially in sandy soils, they always outperform what I designed, because as part of the DEP regs, they only let you use 8 inches per hour in a sand, which we all know drains a lot faster than 8 inches per hour in a sandy soil. So these added items have no impact. And then as far as the water would just run back into the area, the open space area in the rear, and not impact any neighbors anyhow, which eventually ends up in a tidal area. But that being said, I would say that our on-site stormwater systems are more than adequate to handle these small additions on all of these properties. So that's where we're at, and I'll look to take questions from the board and input from you all.
I do have one question. Steve, lot 4, has that been sold yet, but would you be putting in the pool?
That has been sold, so the owner wants to put a pool in.
So the owner would be the one who was actually constructing the pool?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, can you speak for him or her or them?
The only thing I can speak for is that they're hoping to put the pool in this fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Martha,
Yes. Yeah. So.
um,
And they're not, and I don't know if they've applied, I don't know if they've applied. I do believe you need a building permit for a pool, correct? So, and I don't know if they've applied to Peter for a building permit yet. Peter, the inspector for building commissioner for a building permit for the pool yet. And I just know Ben had relayed to me, said, hey, lot 4 wants a pool, and they want to get that in. They'd like to get it in this fall.
Yeah, I can check on that. I don't know if they've applied or not.
Yeah.
and back to the retaining wall between 107 and lot 9. You want to change the materials just for aesthetic purposes? Is that what I understand?
No, I think on the plan, I'm sorry. So on unit, this wall here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the plan, I look back, it was a Versalock wall, which is the 18-inch wall. We'd actually be using a larger block, the Recon or Shea block, which is, each block is it's larger in size. But they all kind of, they all come with either sort of an earth tone, or I think we've all seen them, that kind of split block look. Originally we had the Versalock, and Mark he was originally thinking he wanted to change and use a a concrete wall, similar to the wall he put up at the entry. Definitely a lot more very architectural, where you finish the wall with a sort of a faux stone finish. So the original approved wall was a modular block. We're just going from Versalock to an 18-inch block to a 1 foot, I think it's 1 foot 4 inch high by. I'm sorry, what's that?
I'm sorry, did the original approval even specify the material?
Well, no, I had a detail of a Versalock wall, which is typically I think they're 18-inch long by 12-inch high. And so it was an 18-inch by 12-inch high block versus the large block is 4 foot long, 4 foot lengths by 1 foot 4 inch height. So there's less, they're more they're a little more robust and massive. One thing about the large block is you don't, if you go to, you can go to 10 feet without any reinforcing grid. Whereas a Versalock, if you go over 4 feet, you need grid. And the Versalocks definitely are not as robust. I've seen them, they're definitely cheaper to install. And I've seen them sort of bow a little bit in places at times. But yeah, so that's really the only change in the wall type, is going from a smaller block to a larger, more robust block there. And as
May I
far
ask
as the face, when you see it, anyone seeing it would be the owner of Unit 9, basically, is what the person who would see the block, the block type.
So Steve, you had a photograph in your submittal with the letter, and
Oh,
I
okay.
can see
Let's see if I can
bigger
jump back to that.
outlines of the
Oh, there
blocks,
we go.
but it looks like there's
Yeah.
they're split face or look like they're split face, and they have sort of a patterning inside. So is that actually what's being proposed? What you're showing?
Yeah, exactly. This is the type of wall that we'd be looking at. I forgot that I had submitted that. So that's the look. And as I said, basically the person on Unit 9 or Lot 9 or exclusive use area 9 would be the ones who would be looking at it. And most likely what they'd end up doing is planting to, you end up planting down at the base to soften it up. Sometimes they plant, vine or ivy that crawls up and sort of softens it and such. So, for the homeowner and stuff, depending what they want to look at.
Okay. Let me turn to the board members. Peter, do you have any questions?
No, Steve, thanks for the update. Larry, I just think it'd be a great opportunity for a sidewalk.
Yeah, okay. Woody, what are your thoughts? Did we lose Woody?
He's muted.
He's muted. Still muted. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
You are.
Okay, I don't know how I got muted, but anyways, I was gonna ask Steve, so you consider this the larger, more robust block wall, stronger?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, and then my second question would be, you're removing the trees as you described, what are you replacing them with?
I think I can't remember, hold on a sec
Mike suggested.
Okay, yeah, so Mike, I'm just looking at the email. So if the trees are to be removed, planting into consideration, I would suggest the following: tulip trees, pin oak, red maple, sycamore, and white spruce, to mix in as the evergreen.
Okay, and I guess that's it, other than I might concur with Peter as a sidewalk might be nice.
Okay, thanks, Woody. Mary, your thoughts?
I just wonder, of all the trees just mentioned by Steve, which one grows fastest?
I defer to I'll have to talk to Mike. One thing, if the board is accepting this, I think I'm sure you'd want a deep, I think what we would do is look, okay, what's available. Unfortunately, I think I'm not a landscape guy and arborist, but I know you can plant in the fall. I remember planting, fall was always a good time, but I think we might miss that opportunity by the time we get everything straightened away. So it'd probably be a spring planting, most likely. Depending on the recommendations from Mike or the landscaper doing the work out there, the other landscaper doing the work. So I would defer to them as I think pin oaks are slower, I believe, but I definitely defer to him what would grow and probably holds the foliage the longest during the growing season before before shedding and losing the leaves, just for screening purposes.
Curious.
Yeah, Joe, I'm just looking at Joe Sawicka's letter. He's suggesting that, exactly that, a landscaping plan. So I think what I'm hearing is we'd like to do a site walk.
Okay. Well, fortunately for me, I'm scooting out of town. My wife and I are going on a trip to Italy for a couple weeks.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, thank you. So I am not available to meet on site. I think I can meet before the next, let's see, where are we? Let me look at my calendar. I will be back on the 4th. And I think, when do we fly back? I'm trying to think of, I'm sure the board members, I don't know if the weekends are better or now that it's getting dark early. The week of, let's see, so November. So do you have a meeting on the 1st?
Yeah,
Yes.
1st and 15th.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna, unfortunately, I won't be available. I could probably have Ben, I could probably talk to Ben. He'd probably be available to take you around the site. He's doing a lot of the work, so he would be available. And I think he could speak to much of these items. And if you guys weren't comfortable, with that meeting, if you weren't comfortable to move forward, then we could arrange another one after that. I don't know if we can set up 2 dates, one with Ben and one with me, and it seems like a lot of moving parts. But I'll be back on the 4th, so I could meet anytime between the 5th and the 11th, anytime that week before the 15th. Or if you wanted to meet with Ben, I think it'd be tough for me to set something up. I could try and text him right now to see if he's available. What's your pleasure?
Well, Martha, you want to just see if you can work something out and
Yeah.
get back to the board members?
Sure. Steve, I think I may have Ben's contact information, but
Yep.
Steve, if you want to send it to me.
Or either
Yeah.
that, or we just have to pick a date and hope he's available. I mean,
Right, but we can coordinate offline for a date, so.
Yeah,
And if
Yeah.
you all are comfortable meeting with Ben as opposed to Steve, we can, just work offline to get that set up.
Yeah.
Do you think he'll be ready to answer any engineering questions?
maybe not so much as maybe as a stormwater and such, probably not so much. Grading, yes. Construction of the wall, yes.
And I'm just wondering, if you're not going to be at the November 1st meeting, we should probably look at putting this on the November 15th agenda, in which
Yeah.
case meeting with you the week of the 6th might make sense, but it's really up to the board.
well, it's not a public hearing, so we don't have to pick a date certain now.
No, we don't.
I mean, certainly we could aim for the 15th, but I don't think we need a motion or anything.
No, I'm just kind of thinking, it seems like it makes most sense not to include this on the November 1st agenda. Steve's not going to be there to talk to it, so.
No, November 1st isn't going to work.
All right, well,
So
let's
we'll
offline.
go for the 5th. Try to do it for the 15th, and we can meet with Ben, and then if we need a further follow-up with you when you get back, Steve, I'm sure we can do that.
Yeah, it sounds good. And I'll be kind of keeping a little bit of an eye on my emails and such. Unfortunately, we'll be keeping an eye on stuff while I'm away.
Does
So
that-
Martha, if you do email me, I will respond. Might not be that day. It might be a couple days later, which is probably no different than I do now. So
No comment.
Let me ask the other board members, Pete, you comfortable with this approach?
I don't know. I would just think it'd be good to have Steve there.
Yeah,
I would like, say,
you think we ought to wait
Wait,
until Steve gets
yeah,
back then?
you got,
Okay.
that makes continuity.
All right. All right. Do you want to try and set something out now?
No,
Okay. Good. It's too far away.
Right.
I gotta get-
Steve, why don't you send me some times? Right. Steve, send me some times that you're available that week of November 6th after you get back, and then we can
All right.
coordinate with.
Sounds good.
There you go.
Yeah, sounds good.
Wunderbar.
All
Good
right.
Right. So I actually question. So what do I guess as far as the board's feeling, as far as those changes, anything that you see right now that gives you a lot of angst or you really don't feel comfortable about that I should think about?
Well, speaking for myself, it's just, it's hard to envision all this on a piece of paper. It really,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
um,
All right.
so,
Yeah, it does. Actually, walking on site, it definitely it's helpful to see. Ben had set he had set a couple bean poles with he flagged where the original foundation grade was proposed and where we're looking to put it to just show how it relates to the building next to it. And it was very helpful. I felt it was helpful, Martha. I think it was probably helpful for you too to envision that. It's definitely helpful to really helpful to get on site and look at it.
Yep, for sure. Is there if board members want to go just on their own to kind of drive through it and get a sense of the lay of the land, is that okay?
Oh yeah,
Before
it's
we-
fine. They can absolutely drive through. I'll just let Ben and Maggie know that you guys, I think anybody can drive down there through and just drive around the cul-de-sac and back. It's coming together. They're starting at some landscaping, the landscaping coming in. It's definitely coming together finally. And it's funny. I didn't see Mark's vision as far as the whole layout. And now that it's in, and once it's landscape, I think it'll be very nice down there. And I'm also impressed how you really can't. It's not that from up above, you really don't see much of it up on High Road, looking down on it. So it kind of blends in down below, and it's good to see that. All of the other nice item is that it seems as if the use next door with Matt, and the development is probably a little better. Matt is now, it's kind of a nice riding facility now between that use, that lot, and the neighboring lot it's just one large, riding facility where they board horses and they give riding lessons. So it's kind of integrated, quite well, I think, with the development. I think once everything's all done and settled, I think it'll work out fine, which is nice to see.
that's good, very good.
Yeah. But, all right.
All right, sounds good. So we'll plan to meet, do a site walk on the week of November 6th. And Steve,
Yep.
you and I, when are you actually leaving?
I leave Saturday evening.
Okay, so we'll coordinate tomorrow.
Yep. Sounds good. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank
Have a
you.
Good trip, Steve.
Thank you.
Steve.
Will
Yeah,
do.
enjoy yourself.
Steve, have
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Deserve
Thank
it,
Yeah. Bye-bye.
bye.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that about concludes it, with the exception of 84 Boston Road. Martha, I kind of cut you off earlier. Was there anything you wanted to say about that before we adjourn?
No, I think we should just table that and carry it over to the next agenda and make sure. I'm just checking emails again and haven't seen anything from.
I think it would be helpful if they gave us a written schedule update in advance of the meeting.
Yes, it would be helpful. He's done that a few times, but not recently.
Okay. Okay, with that, does anyone have anything else before we say goodnight? Not seeing
I just
anything.
I'd like to say something to Joan Morse. Our hearts go out to you and we are thinking of you now. And we love you.
Thank you, Mary. That was very nice. Okay. Anyone care to move to adjourn? I guess not. We all,
Move to
Oh,
adjourn.
I'll stay.
I'm sorry, Mary, was that a motion to adjourn?
It was indeed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Woody. Any discussion? Hearing none. Pete, how do you vote?
Yes.
Woody, how do you vote?
Yes, and good night, everyone.
Mary, how do you vote?
Indeed, I do vote yes.
And I vote yes as well. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks for everything.